So we're on the bottom line. So about what daf is this? Beis Amud Beis. I guess so. Yeah, we just started. So the one line up from the bottom of Beis Amud Beis, Rabba Amar. So what we were middle of was that the Gemara brought introduction about by Shabbos what would be considered, what would the act of watering, what under which malacha would it fall under which category? And the Gemara machlokes if it's choresh or zareya. Abai said maybe both. And the most kasha was how could we be matir by Shemitah? This is not our main subject. Our subject in the Mishnah is mostly about Moed, Chalam Moed, but it came in the Shvius also, and it said that Mashkel Beis Hashlochin b'Shvius, you're allowed to water because of Hefsid. You'd be allowed to water a field on Shemitah, and the question is why? It should be Choresh or Reya. Not that it's Shabbos, but it should be the same. The more things should be the same categories of malacha as far as agriculture. So if by Shabbos watering is either considered plowing or it's considered planting, and both of them are aser on Shemitah, so how do they permit it? So the first so far we had on Friday was Abai. Abai said you're right. If it will be the Raisa case, then it'll be aser. The only case is B'Shvius B'Zman Hazeh. According to Rebbe, he brought down a source that Rebbe holds that not always is Shemitah the Raisa, and the Mefarshim say it has maybe to do. Rebbe Chanal says if the Goyim are there, so there is no Shemitah, but it's only Rabbanan. I don't know what it means exactly, but I think the Rambam will learn when Yovel is not Nagel, when Yovel is not relevant because you don't have Kol Yoshvei Allah, so then Shemitah is only Rabbanan. So Enechanami, if you have a Shemitah the Raisa, wouldn't be a lot of water because of Hefsid, because it's Issa the Raisa. Only by Shemitah B'Zman Hazeh when it's Rabbanan, so then you could water because of financial loss. That was one to ask me. That was Abaye. And now we're one line up. Rabba Amar.
This is watering and weeding.
Our Mishnah doesn't say anything about weeding. Well, we're on Mishnah. It's true that you're right that weeding, it does say over here is a question by Shabbos if it's a Reya Chodesh, but that's not what the Gemara is trying to extract because our Mishnah says Mashkin Beis Hashlochin b'Shvius, so it doesn't say anything about weeding in our Mishnah. So the kash is, since we see over there that watering is considered Chodesh or Zareyas, how come we allow to water in our Mishnah by Shemitah? And the answer is Shvius B'Zman Hazeh Rabbanan. One line up, Rabba Amar. Afilu Tem Rabbanan. It could be even going according to Rabbanan of Rebbe. This is only Rebbe said before that Shvius B'Zman Hazeh Rabbanan. It seems Rabbanan would argue they hold that the Shvius is always the Raisa. But I have a teretz also. Avos Asur Rachmana told those, top of Gimel and Aleph, told those La Asur Rachmana. That even though by Shabbos you find 39 Avos Malachas and the rest of them are told those, there are 39 main categories. And we said over there, Choresh, Soreya, these are examples of the main categories, 39. And under there are subcategories called toldos, and they're also the Raisa. As far as Hilchos Shabbos goes, there's no difference if it's an Av or a Tolda. Maybe there's no difference at all. And but here we're saying by Shemitah that the Torah only prohibited the main category, means Chorei, Zoreya. But even though it has toldos, there are such things by Shabbos, you find that they have subcategories. The subcategory is not Asim of the Raisa. The subcategory is only Asim of the Rabbanan. And therefore, the Rabbanan could waive it if it's a need of hefsid. So that's going to be the answer over here, that it's true that by Shabbos on the Choresh or Zareya is watering, but it's only a tolda. And by Shemitah there's no toldos. But the Raisa, the tolda is not Raisa, it's only a Rabbanan, and therefore, in case of financial loss, they will not there, this is a Rabbanan. How do you know that the toldos that the Torah didn't ask? This is Rabba's main answer. Rabba's answer is toldos Lasa Rahmana, that with the Raisa, the toldos, the subcategories of the agricultural laws are not asim of the Raisa. How do you know that? The Chsid. So the cholos is more, cholos is more. So here the Gemara just says, etc. There's a gomer, etc. So we need the etc. over here. So let's go on the screen a second just to bring the pasuk down. I have to close off the screen. One second, please. I have to close off the screening a second, and to go on again. Okay, this is the pasuk that the Gemara is going to quote it. I just wrote out the whole thing because the Gemara doesn't bring the whole pasuk. The beginning of Parshas Bahar. Ubashana Shvi'i Shabbos Shabbosoni Yalor Shabbos Ladinoi. So the cholos is Rabacham cholos is more. Ei Sefich Kitzei cholos Siktor B'Sin Veni Zivach cholos Sipsor. Shna Shabbosoni Yalor. So the seventh year should be a stop, a rest for the land. It should be Shabbos to Hashem. So the cholos is Ra. You shouldn't sow your field. You shouldn't plant your field. Kam cholos is more. You shouldn't prune your vineyard. You shouldn't cut, you shouldn't reap the cuts here, the wheat that's growing, the harvest, you shouldn't cut down. And in whatever the word is here means to be separated from whatever the grapes you shouldn't harvest. So the Gemara's point is going to be that there's a lot of extra words over here. It says lo sizra, lo siktor, don't plant, don't reap. So tismor, to prune, is a subcategory of planting, that whatever helps to grow. And sivtzor is the same as siktor. When you're harvesting grapes, you're reaping the grapes off the vine. It's the same thing as a tolda of tiktzor. Means if the Torah would have included toldos, all of the subcategories, so it would have been enough to say the main category. Would have said lo sizra and lo siktor, and I would have known already that the toldos are also going to be also subcategories. That pruning is considered planting, and harvesting grapes is also considered harvesting wheat. There's no difference. It's a tolda. The fact that the Torah had to enumerate even the toldos, that shows that the Torah is saying only the toldos that I'm telling you, but don't take it as a rule that if there's an av, there's also going to be a tolda. By Masech Shabbos, for instance, if it would say lo sizra, by Hilchos Shabbos, it would say lo sizra, lo siktzor, the Torah wouldn't have had to say also lo sizmor, lo sivtzor, because that's a subcategory. The fact that the Torah the Torah wanted to enumerate toldos, that means that toldos is not included by default. It's only if I tell you them. So therefore, the Gemara's diak, the fact that it says extra words, is to tell you that only these specific toldos are going to be prohibited, but don't take it as a rule, and any toldos is aser. So therefore, even though we're going to say choresh and zoreya, maybe there's a subcategory of it that's called watering, but the watering is not going to be aser. That's what the Gemara's diak is going to be. The Gemara says all this. I'm not going to put it onto the screen because the Gemara doesn't bring the whole pasuk. So the Gemara takes it for granted that just read it on. So I just put on the screen to be able to read on. So the Gemara goes back. The pasuk says, let's analyze it. Zmira b'chlal b'ziriya, and b'tzira is b'chlal k'tzira. Even if the Torah wouldn't have said pruning and harvesting grapes, it would have been included anyway, because pruning is included in planting, and harvesting grapes is included in harvesting wheat. So why did the Torah have to enumerate it? Remember that Hani told us in order to tell us that only these told us specifically that I enumerated, those are the ones that are chayiv, but other told us that I didn't say is not chayiv. So that's Rabbi Seres. You have two terutzim to say how come you're allowed to water on Shemitah because of financial loss, either Bisman Azeh according to Rebbe that whole Shemitah is Rabbanan, or even according to Rabbanan, told us are Rabbanan, even when the Shemitah is Daraisa, but only the Avos are Daraisa, the told us is Rabbanan. And since watering is only a tolda, so the Rabbanan is only Rabbanan, and therefore they could permit it in case of financial loss. The Gemara, that's the end of the answer. That's two answers, Rabbi and Rava, and both of them, I think we pass like Rebbe that Shvius Bisman says Rabbanan, but this also I think is true that the toldos are only considered Rabbanan. The Gemara continues a kasha on the whole yisod of Rava that says the toldos is Rabbanan. The low is that
Bisman has that.
Bisman,
not applicable. That's
the first teretz. It's a Tzavais teretz. And the second teretz is that toldos is always Rabbanan. Toldos of Shemitah is always Rabbanan. All the toldos of an agricultural thing, whatever's going to be watering. Watering is only a tolda. So it's only Rabbanan. The Torah doesn't answer it. It's only Asam Rabbanan. And therefore they could matter it to Pseida. The Gemara is a kasha. The Gemara is going on Rava, like a side point. Is Rava right? Below, is it not so? Is it not Asam the Raisa told us? But Tanya, the Gemara is reading a long Raisa, and all these things in pink or red are going to say that it's also Wasser. These are also a bunch of toldos, and it says that they're all Wasser. It says it again and again, the same pasuk over and over again. And the Gemara says, the Raisa says all these things are Wasser. And the kasha is, Rabbi is saying that the toldos are not only the Rabbanan. Yes, mashma that is the Raisa. The low is it not the Raisa? But Tanya says in the Raisa, Sad chalos is what? Cham chalos is more. Only yellow ziru of zimur. The pasuk says don't plant and don't prune, and you might think only those are the Raisa. How do you know these other kinds of agricultural acts that are toldos? Nichosh means to take out weeds. Idor means to shovel, to hoe, to soften the earth by shoveling. Kisuach is to cut down. Today also the word mekaseach is to cut down, like a lawnmower is called a mekaseach. So the kisuach means to cut out also the bad stuff, but not I don't mean to say a lawnmower just to make it shorter, to cut it, but it means to take out the bad by cutting it out. The nichosh would be by pulling it out, and kisuach is going to be cutting it down short. So all these things are also aser. How do you know? Just go to the pasuk again. We'll just change the screen a little bit. Let's go to the screen. I'll just take off all of these. Here it says Sadcha lo Sizra and Kamacha lo Sizmor. But the fact that the Torah wrote it in such a way, it doesn't just say lo Sizra, it doesn't just say lo Sizmor. So the pasuk wants you to be able to read it Sadcha lo. Let's highlight that Sadcha lo. and also kamuchalo. And that's a drasha that from the way that the Torah expressed it, that you can read it in the field, nothing. In the carrier, nothing. It really says lo sizra, sadcha lo sizra, kamucha lo sizmo. But the fact that just the way the Torah worded it, it could have said lo sizra sadcha, something like that, or lo sizra. The fact that it says sadcha lo sizra, so you could read it sadcha lo, sadcha nothing, nothing in your field, nothing in your carrier. That's what the Gemara is going to say 9 times. The Gemara is going to say this 3 times, 3 groups of 3, and each time that's going to be the drasha that you're not allowed to do other things at all, nothing at all.
But since the pasuk could have written it in a different fashion, so we're not gairis sadcha.
We stop, right? We stop after the word. Since you could just read those 2 words and not to go further, so we isolate and crop those 2 words. We see sadchalo and karmachalo, and it says nothing. Sadchalo, lo, karmachalo, like 2 different sukkim. Lo kamulacha shebesadcha, lo kamulacha shebekarmcha. Nothing. You're not allowed to do anything in the field, nothing in the vineyard. So these 3 things also asa, nichosh, idor, kisuah, they're also asa. Also, it's going to say the same thing over and over again. Another to be consummate, let's see Rashi a little bit. Mekarsamin, he says also that it's pruning, but he says it's pruning a tree. Before by kerem, it's called by a vine, it's called zomer. But the same thing by other trees is called to be mekarsim. So how do you know you're not allowed to prune other trees in Bezardin? That means it means to take off extra branches. Pruning is when you take off the bad ones, leave the good ones. But when you even take off the good ones also, it's too much. You need that the tree shouldn't be nourishing so many branches, because then all of them don't come out good. So you cut off some of them, and then the ones that are remaining are good. That's called mezardin, I think Rashi says. Let's see Rashi on that. Mezardin. Yeah, he says the good. Yeah, that's what he says. That you took off all of that, take off many good ones, bad ones, because the ones that will be left, the fewer, they'll be able to flourish better. And mefas gembila means to support. You put sticks in order to be able to support the branches that they shouldn't fall. So how you're not allowed to do these things either. Tamaloma sadchalo karmachalo. The same drasha again. That it doesn't say just lo sizra and lo sizmor. It says sadchalo sizmor. So you read it sadchalo karmachalo. Lo kamalacha shebesadcha, lo kamalacha shebekarmacha. You can't do anything. So these things are also asa. A third group, that you're not allowed to fertilize. Zevel is fertilize. Mefarkin means to take off, to unload. If there are stones and things that are on the tree, on the roots, things that are bothering it, so you're not allowed to unload them. Ein ma'avkin, that's some kind of a pesticides and stuff like that. To put avak, is that true? No, Rashi says different. Ma'avkim shesharash of nirim, umechasin also ba'avak. That if the roots are revealed, so you have to cover it up. That it should be covered with earth. So that's called ma'avkin, and ma'ashnin is more like pesticides that you make smoke in order to get the bugs off. So again, these 4 things also asa. Nothing. You're not allowed to do anything. So it said over here 9 or altogether 10. It said 10 different malachas that are asa, and the Brisa brings the pasuk again and again. So doesn't it say here that all these told us are the Raisa? Rabbi said a Yisod. Top line of the page, he said, told us Lasa Rahmana, and he brought it Russia because the pasuk didn't have to say Zamira and Betsira. Since the pasuk enumerated these 2 told us, means that all the other told us are not Asim of the Raisa. But this Raisa says all these 10 things are Raisa, and it brings a pasuk the whole time. Sat Chalo, Karma Chalo. Sounds like it's the Raisa. So it's against Rabba. The Raisa goes on. We could jump to the answer. The Gemara's answer is drop further, and it said just to jump a second. The last one on the line, about 7-8 lines later, the Gemara says Midrabana and Kro Smach de Alma. The answer to the kasha is going to be that even though it brings a pasuk over here, it's only a Rabbanan. Sometimes the Gemara does that it brings psukim just to clothe it into the psukim like a remez, but not that. Or sometimes it's a mnemonic. Rishon say different shatam and asmachta, but it doesn't. Don't take it literally that it's the Raisa. That's really the answer to the kasha. We're going to go further. I just jumped ahead just to get to the answer, but the Gemara at this point is asking that the Raisa says all these 10 things are also from a pasuk, and the answer is going to be that it's Rabbanan with an asmachta. Don't take the pasuk seriously. And Rabba is really right that told us is only Rabbanan. But to go further, the Brisa continues. The Brisa said that these 10 things, the ones in pink, are all asur, and the Brisa goes and says there are things that are mutter. Yochol, lo yikashkesh tachas azesim, v'lo yader tachas akfanim, v'lo yimalei nekam mayim, v'lo yaser ugios lekfanim. You might think that these malachas, 4 malachas are also asur. Here the Gemara is going to say no, these are going to be mutter. What are they? The kashkesh tachas azesim, Rashi says that it means to shovel under the olive tree. Rashi says idor. So before it says that lo ya'ader, before it says the idor was also before. Here Rashi says that the word kishkush, I'm sorry, Here it says also either lo yader tachas akfanim, but there's a regular hoeing and shoveling in the field. That's also before. But here it says there's some kind of special malacha that's done under the olive tree and under the vine. Both of them are the same thing. Rashi says kishkush and either is both the same thing of hoeing. But one is the malacha that's done under an olive tree. One is the one that's done under a grapevine. And that's something that's not regular shoveling. It isn't the same malacha, but the purpose of doing it is probably different than you're doing it in the field. That's what the Gemara is going to say soon. So you might think these things are also asa. In the mind that you have a ditch that you're not allowed to fill up with water. You might think that the ditch, of course, is going to be something that's going to be watering something. You might think that you're not allowed to do it. We had that in the Mishnah. Mishnah's talking about cholamoy. It says you're not allowed to. Here it says by Shemitah you are allowed to make these ditches under the grapevine in order to be able to fill it up with water, and it should get well drunk, well fed. So you might think these four things are also asa because it says sadchalo, kamachalo, everything's asa. No, these things are mutter. Tamalom or sadchalo sizra means don't ignore the fact that the pasuk does say sadchalo sizra. It doesn't just say sadchalo; it says sadchalo sizra. We said at Russia the fact that it was worded in such a way, the arrangement of the pasuk, you could read it sadchalo to say that everything's asa. But don't forget that it does say sadchalo sizra. So the Gemara is going to recognize that even in the drash world, we'll say here the asmachta world, that sometimes it's only something which is sadchalo sizra. Not everything is going to be asa. That it could have just said sadchalo. If you want to say that everything is asa, it didn't have to specify dafka planting. It could have just said nothing in the field. Since it says dafka zriya, that's coming to teach you something. It's coming to compare everything else that we're saying is asa is only if it's similar to lo sizra. It's only usher, even though we're saying that it's usher, other things are usher besides what it says openly. Sadchalo, karmachalo, everything's usher. That's only if it applies both to a sada and a kerem. So a malacha that is common to both situations, both a field and also a vineyard. But if it's something which is only designated for one type of them, only for a sada, only for a kerem, so then it's not going to be usher. And these are designated only for a zayis, only for a geffen. So it's not something which is common to a field also. So it's true that we broaden the Isra of Sadchalo Sizra to Sadchalo. And Kamacha also we say Kamachalo. But it's only those malachas that are common to both a field, a wheat field, and also to a vine. So over there, those malachas that you do for both, like I said, the whole list over here, all these things, it seems that I don't get all of them. I don't know enough to be able to say why they apply both to a field and to a kerem. But the fact that they say that let's say some of them I could get the fertilizing. Fertilizing is something you do to a field. You also do it to a kerem. The farkin, ma'avkin, ma'ashnin, these things could be that they apply in all cases, in both scenarios, both in the scenario of a field and the scenario of a kerem. That's what we answer. But those things which only apply to one of them, we're not going to answer. That's what the Brisa says. Anyway, that's the end of the Brisa. Till here is the end of the Brisa. This was all the Brisa. Without the word Rabbanan, I wasn't able to do that. Okay, they don't allow me. But the Brisa said that there are 10 things that are asa from the pasuk of Sadchalo, Karmachalo. There are another 4 things that are mutter. That's not our subject so much. But anyway, the kasha was that the Brisa says 10 things are asa, and Rabbi started off top line that told us not asa, told us mutter the Brisa only asa midrabanan. Here the Brisa lists another 10 things that are asa. The Gemara answers midrabanan across machta b'alma. That even though the pasuk, the Gemara brings a pasuk Sadchalo, Karmachalo, it's only in a smachta, and comes out that the whole Brisa is drabanan. And the Gemara means to me that these things that are in green are mutter even midrabanan. Not only it's not asa with the rice, it's even mutter midrabanan. So the things so how does it come out that the rice is only what it says openly? Lo sizra, lo sizmor, lo siktsor, lo sivtsor. Those 4 things is the rice. So everything else is only going to be avos and not toldos. The Brisa says that the things that are apply both to a sad and a kerem will be asa midrabanan. The things that only apply to a kerem only or to a zayis only, then it's even going to be mutter. But back to our main subject, the thing was watering, and the kasha was that it should be asa midrabanan. The answer is no, that it's only what it says in the Torah is asa. Zriya, zimor, ktsira, b'tzira. Only those things are the things that are asa midrabanan. Waterings are told of chorish. Chorish might be daraisa. Yeah, it's also going to be a question coming up. Is chorish itself daraisa rabbanan? We're going to get to that right away. But so far, the Gemara says that watering at most is going to be rabbanan, and therefore they could be matir with the Mokum Seder. We got some more information on the way that other things are asa midrabanan. There's a smachta for it. Sadchalo, karmachalo, but it's only in a smachta. It's really rabbanan. And those things that don't apply to both a sad and a kerem are even mutter midrabanan also.
And again, there's only for Shemitah, not for...
Everything is Shemitah. The whole year is Shemitah. Everything is just Shemitah. Right, they're just talking about Shemitah. The Gemara said that's the whole thing. the Rabbanan Umatif Hapseda, because either because the whole thing is Rabbanan or because the Torah gave it over to the Rabbanan to decide. So Shemitah, Chol wasn't bothering the Gemara. There was a side point over here, a couple of lines, about 5-6 lines. There was a side point that the Bryce over here said Kishkush Tachas Hazesim. Here it says Lei Kashkish. It says it's mutter. We said Yachal Lei Kashkish Tachas Hazesim. It says that it's mutter, but the Bryce is going to bring a kasha that it says over here that Kishkush is asa. That's a side kasha, mamash in parentheses. The Kishkush B'Shvius Mishori is saying that you're allowed to hoe, shovel under the Zaysim. Well, it says in the pasuk B'Shvius Tishmetena Unatashta. That's the pasuk B'Shvius Tishmetena Unatashta. 3 words that you should leave the 7th year. Forsake it means leave the field alone. And the Gemara learns from it. There's a brisa that says Tishmetena Melakashkesh Unatashta Melasakel. It's a brisa that says that from the word Tishmetena we learn out that you're not supposed to be Mekashkesh. You're not supposed to hoe, to shovel under the Zaysim, as the Gemara is saying. And the Tashta means you're not allowed to take off the rocks. And the Kash is that here it said perished in the brisa that you're not allowed to do Kishkush. So are you allowed to or you're not allowed to? The brisa before said that Kishkush is mutter. No, you may. You might think you're not allowed to. No, you are allowed to because it's not besad of a kerem. So here the Brisa says you're not allowed to. The Gemara answers, there are 2 kinds of two reasons to want to shovel under the Zayis tree. One is to strengthen the tree, to make the tree stronger, healthier, and one is to cover in the cracks. And that's called, one is abseda and one is only to make it better. If really only asa, to make it better, to make the tree better, it's not going to be a hefsed. It's only going to improve it. That you're not allowed to do. Stume pili shori. If you're just covering up the cracks in a way that you're just avoiding hefsed, that's mutter. So go back to the brisa. When the brisa before said that kishkush tachas hazesim is mutter, even though the reason they said over here is because it's not avodah shabbasada for shabbakerim. Here the Gemara says that also would be aser, which maybe is a contradiction. But here the Gemara says the only reason it's mutter is because it would be a hefsed. Stumi pili is the case that's mutter. Avui only would be aser. So just to zoom out a second, because I got into a lot of details, just to zoom out, the question was that it says in the Mishnah that you're allowed to water a field that's Beis HaShlochin. It's going to be a loss. If you don't water it during Shemitah, you're allowed to. The kasha was that it should be a Sodaraisa and there's no heter of Hefsid. We had 2 terutzim. One was Abaya that it's only Shvius was Manazeh and Rebbe. And the second teretz was, Rabbi says that even when it's a Shemitah Daraisa, but all toldos, all subcategories is only Rabbanan. Even it might be Choresh or Zareh, whatever it is, but it's a tolda. Watering is only a tolda, and toldos are not also Midaraisa, because the pasuk went out of its way to enumerate 2 toldos that are not included automatically. That comes to tell you that don't make any toldos, only what it says and not any toldos. On the way, we got some more information, but that was the main issue. The Gemara now starts a new subject, which is really goes back to our main subject. Itma Choresh b'Shvius. What if somebody actually plows on Shvius? Till now we spoke about watering, which might be a tolda of Choresh, and we said that the toldas are not asa. Now the Gemara wants to know, how about Choresh itself? How about actually plowing? It doesn't say in the Torah that either. It just spoke before the Gemara took it as it is asa deraisa. The Gemara introduced the kasha. Why should watering be mutter? Either it's Choresh or Zarei. Either one is deraisa. Now the Gemara says not so simple. The Gemara starts a sugya is plowing issa deraisa on Shemitah. The pasuk says, as we have the pasuk, lo sizra, lo sizmor, lo siktzor, lo sipsor. All it says about Shemitah, openly, it only says those 4 things. Planting and pruning, which is similar, a tolda, av, and a tolda, and cutting wheat and cutting grapes. So how about Choresh b'Shvius? Is it not surely it's also Rabbanan? The question is it also the Raisa? Itmar Choresh b'Shvius, Rabbi Yochanan Balas, Machlokes, these 2 Amoraim, Chada Maloka, Chada Meina Loka. One says it's Chayiv Malkus, is this the Raisa? And one says no Malkus, not the Raisa. I think one wants to know, why should it be the Raisa? It doesn't say so. It doesn't say in the pasuk, why should it be the Raisa? So the Gemara is going to bring in the subject called the Klal Prat, that when the Torah says the generality, it says in the pasuk, as we just to go to the pasuk a second, Rashi is going to bring it, but just to see the pasuk, we said, let's go to Rashi better. Rashi, I think I underlined it over here. Here's Rashi. So the cholos is more, cholos is more. This is what you call a klal and a prat. It says in general, everything should stop. Shna Shabbason. Shabbason means everything should, like a Shabbat. Shabbaton, everything should stop. So that's a generality. It should include everything. Then it says a prat. Sad chalos is more, kam chalos is more. Don't plant, don't prune. That's a prat. Klal a prat. So could you? It's also klal a prat a klal. It's not only klal a prat. It's klal a prat a klal. Then it says again. The end of the pasuk says Shabbason Shna Shabbason Yeloretz. Rashi doesn't bring it down, but it's also a klal a prat a klal. Usually klal a prat a klal adds on other things also. You don't just say klal a prat ein b'klal ela masha b'prat. But klal prat to klal, you could add on more things also. So the question is, could you add on more than it says? On a deraisa level, on a Torah level, do you say more or less? Do you add on more than it says? So the Gemara is going to talk about the fact, like Rashi brings down, I skipped the words, but now to read it with the words, Klal Hainu Aseh, and the Prat is a Los Aseh. It's a little bit unique about this Klal Prat over here, Klal Prat Klal, because it doesn't keep in the same, what will be the word? It doesn't keep in the same structure of talking about either Aseh or Los Aseh. If it says the Klal and the Prat both in the affirmative do something, so it says first in general do something, then it says a few details, and then it says again a generality. So we'll have this clean thing called Klal Prat Klal, so you come to be more things. If both of them would be a Los Aseh, it would say don't do thing in general, and then specifically don't do this and this, and then again it says in general don't do the whole thing. So then also you have a Klal Prat Klal. But this is called a Klal Ba'aseh and a Prat Los Aseh. It's not a regular Klal Prat Klal because it changes structure. First it talks about when it says it should rest, that's a positive commandment. It's not Shabboson Yaloris. Then when it wants to tell you don't do something, that's in the negative. So Chalos is right, Kama Chalos is more. Does that fit into the rule of a Klal Prat Klal? So if you do, you'd be able to add on more things also and say that not only what it says, other things also. So Harisha could be up there. But if you don't, if it doesn't fit into the rule of Klal Prat Klal, then you only could say whatever it says, whatever it doesn't say, it doesn't say. That's going to be the Gemara's point. So
it says when it says Loka, that means it would be Duraisa.
Yes, you're right. There's only Malchus on the right. So yeah, that's another way of saying that is the Raisa. So the Gemara first starts to explain why should it be the Raisa. Maybe they're arguing about what Rabbi Oven in the name of Rabbi Law said. What did he say? Dam Rabbi Oven, Dam Rabbi Law, Kalmakum Shinama Klal Basei, and a Prat below Sase, and then also B'chlal Prat Klal. That if they're not in the same structure, if we have maybe if there's any other word, not only structure in the same direction, like either a positive or a negative. Is it affirming? Is it affirmative or is it negative? So if it's not in the same, okay, whatever, if anybody could get that word. Okay, in English. Like we would say sometimes in the same gender.
Isn't it the same tense or it's not a tense?
Tense. I don't know if that's called a tense. Okay, everyone gets the idea. I'm not sure what we mean, what the word you're looking for, but we get the idea. So he says that if it doesn't fit under the same structure, we use the word structure meanwhile, just for lack of a word. So it doesn't come under the rule of a klal. It's not a official klal prat klal. Then it doesn't work, and therefore. So he said that this would not be a klal prat klal, and therefore you would not be able to add anything on. You wouldn't be able to say that choresh is also included because it doesn't say so. It just says zoreya, zomer, kotzer borer, and kotzer ksira and betzira. So that would be a reason to say that there's no malchus. If you hold like Rabbi Oven or Rabbi Ilah, that would be a reason that it's not malchus because it doesn't fit into. It's not added on. You can't add anything else more than it says. Mandama loka, let's say the Rabbi Oven or Rabbi Ilah. Mandama ena loka, it's like the Rabbi Oven. Maybe the one that says that he's chayiv malchus is because he doesn't hold of this rule of Rabbi Oven, and he holds that it is a good klal prat klal. Therefore, he is chayiv malchus. And the one who says he's not chayiv malchus does hold the Rabbi Oven, and that's why he's not chayiv malchus. Do we have a pshat? Maybe that's what they're arguing about. The reason that should be malchus or not is dependent if you say this is considered a klal prat klal. But the Gemara says no, not necessarily. The full yam let's say Rabbi Oven Rabbi Ilah could be everybody doesn't hold of him, and it should be chayiv malchus. It should be chayiv malchus because it is a klal prat klal. What's the reason to say that it's not chayiv, not the raisa? Man dama loke shapir. The one who says chayiv malchus is good because it's a klal prat klal. Or man dama ina loke amalacha mechdi smir b'chlal zriya b'tzir b'chlal ketzira l'mayel chesak hasvenu rachmana l'meima de ahani told those who the machayiv atolda achvina lo machayiv. Very familiar, rings a very big bell. That this is not much what Rabbi said on top of the page. Rabbi on top of the page said that told us ad Rabbanan. Because why is told us Rabbanan? Because the pasuk went out of its way to say these specific toldos. Since it says specific toldos, it's coming to that means it wouldn't have been included in the avos already. The fact that the Torah had to speak it out, that's not included. So the same logic that the Gemara said before, a reason why toldos should not be the raisa. Now the Gemara is coming to say that anything that it doesn't say is not the raisa. The fact that the Torah enumerated only these four things is coming to tell you only these four things and nothing else. And therefore, not only is watering not the raisa, even plowing is not the raisa. It's very interesting, the structure of the Gemara, because first the Gemara started talking about as if it's pashut that plowing will be the raisa. The question only is about the watering. And that's how the Gemara came into the subject. Why should watering even what they're on the Makom Seder by Beis HaShlachim? And the Gemara said, either because the Shvius Bismana says Rabbanan, according to Rebbe, or like Rabbi said, that told us is Rabbanan. Now the Gemara is broadening the whole idea and saying not only told us Rabbanan, whatever it doesn't say is Rabbanan. It only says these four things, only these four things is the Raisa, nothing else is the Raisa. So the Gemara Mamish copy and paste, it took the top of the page where Rabbi said this drasha to say that it didn't have to say Zemira and Betzira because it's already included. The fact that the Torah did say it is coming to say only what I say and nothing else. And now before the Gemara used it only for the Toldos. And now the Gemara is coming to say that nothing, whatever it doesn't say is not the Raisa. And that'll be as far to say that even plumbing is not the Raisa. And now we get a big, call it a bonus, I don't know what you want to call it, extra credit or something. And we get the rest of the page for free. Means the whole page is mamish word for word. We just finished learning it. The Gemara copies and pastes the whole Gemara that we learned at the top of the page. It mamish as a word for word. And the Gemara's question is going to be, you're saying that it's not the Raisa? There's a Raisa that says 10 things, all these pink things, all these list over here is all the Raisa. This whole thing, the Gemara is going to mamish repeat word for word, or maybe a couple of words different, but mamish is mamish a repeat. So the Daf Yom is going to be a little bit earlier tonight because we're just reading it through to say the Bryce over again. The Gemara says in the second wide line, the low is nothing else than Raisa. But Tanya, I only know that these two things, like it says. How about Idor, Kishkush, Kisuach? Before the word Kishkush, before they take out the word Kishkush, and Rabbi Kvek points out that it should be really what it says before. It says Nichush, Idor, Kisuach. That's what it should say over here. It's put in the word Nichush instead. Weeding, hoeing, cutting out the bad weeds. The fact that it could have said lo sizra, it says sadcha lo sizra, so you learn out nothing in the field, nothing in the kerem. How about other things? Same as before, that you're not allowed to also prune other trees. Mizardin, we said to take off the extra branches, even if they're good ones, also in order that the tree shouldn't be overloaded with work to do to give nutrients to so many branches. And befaskin bilan is to support it with the poles, with sticks. Nothing in the field, nothing in the vineyard. Before it said also that you're not allowed to fertilize, you're not allowed to take off the stones off the roots, you're not allowed to smoke pesticides and stuff like that to get the bugs off. All these things, no. So it says 10 things that you're not allowed to do here. It says 9, but all these things that you're not allowed to do. So how are you saying that it's not the Raisa? The pasuk means a pasuk over here. Again, the same Raisa as before. There are some things that are mutter even. You might think these things are also asa to hoe under the olive tree, to hoe under the grapevine, to fill up these ditches with water, and to make the ditch around the geffen that it should be able to fill up with water. Tamud Lama, no, it is going to be mutter. Sadcha lo sizra, that it does say after all lo sizra. So why does it have to say lo sizra? Why doesn't it just say sadcha lo? It could have been, would have been included if it would have said sadcha lo. Why does it say sadcha lo sizra? Only if it's something which applies both to a field and to a vineyard, but these things don't, so therefore it's even mutter. But anyway, this whole kasha was back that how could you say that only what it says, the 4 things that it says in the Torah is asr, and everything else is mutter, so therefore chorish is not going to be also the Raisa. The Raisa says all these things are asr. The Gemara answers, same as before, midrabanan across machda ba'alma. That is, even though it says a pasuk, it's really midrabanan, it's just a pneumonic or it's just a remez, and therefore with the Raisa it is mutter. And there's an opinion that says that charish is only drabanan. That even though other in Masech Shabbos, let's say a chorish is going to be a deraisa, it's one of the main malachas. But here the Torah says only these 4 things are asr. Okay, that's the end of the sugi so far. It's going to, the Gemara continues a little bit, but we have enough. The sugi on the begin and Amud Aleph said that there's a big tzad to say that by Shemitah only what it says openly in the Torah: Sadcha lo sizra, Karmach lo sizmor, Sviach ketzich lo sikzar, Esin ben nizivach lo sif. So those are the 4 things that are rasa. Nothing else is rasa. With the Raisa only with Rabbanan. And if there's reasons, the Rabbanan can be materis.
So plowing would really be the only Rabbanan?
According to this, plowing will only be Rabbanan. As far as the halacha, I don't know. What are we asking about plowing? Right nowadays in Shemitah, we have to find out what are we asking about. The Gemara says on top line with base, Gasser Avdimi Yamar, Yachal Yilkal Tosefes, Vanasa Tamud Leptura. Those are the words that he said. Avdimi said that you might think, where did he come from? He came from Eretz Yisrael to Babel. Avdimi was one of those that came back and forth, traveling from Eretz Yisrael to Babel, and they brought the news of that was the communications in those days, Yeah, certain people, Ravdimi, Ravin, I think, a few other famous ones. Ula used to come back and forth, and they used to bring the news back from the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael. How do we have all of the news of the Amoram of Eretz Yisrael? Because these people came and told us back and forth, and they told the Chachmei Eretz Yisrael what Babel says. So when Ravdimi came, he said the following: Yilkal Tosefes. I might think that Yechayiv Malkus for Tosefes. Tosefes means something additional. But that's not Talmud Lubtura. There's some drash to say that is pater. That's all. That's what the words mean. There's some drash. The Gemara has some kind of a drash to say that is pater. It's not Chayiv Malkus. So very vague. You might think Yechayiv for some kind of additional thing, some kind of musaf, some kind of Tosefes, and then there's a drash to say that is pater. But Rav Dimi said, my Talmud, my Tosefes, but I don't know what it is. It means I got some kind of formula to say that you might think Yechayiv for Tosefes, Kamash Malon, but I don't know what they're talking about. Which Tosefes are they talking about? Which additional thing? And what's the drasha to say that you're not chayiv? So not clear. Rabbi Elazar Omer. So now they're going to two pshatim to explain what Rav Dimi might have meant. There's going to be Rabbi Elazar, there's going to be Rabbi Yochanan. And the blue, these two, I just colored it a little bit to say the two possible pshatim. The yellow is on the top line. That's the title that we're trying to figure out. And these are going to be the two pshatim to try to explain what that formula meant. You might think Yechayiv Malkus for some kind of Tosefes, and the answer is no, you're not. I mean, and a blank, like a vague answer. There's a drasha to say no. We don't know what the drasha is. So here goes.
So we don't know, right now we don't know the Metzias.
We don't even know what the case is. There's a certain case you might think Yechayiv for, that's called Tosefes, some kind of addition, and we don't know what that means. And there's a drasha that says no, you're not chayiv. So what is it? What are we talking about? What are we talking about? And what is the drasha to say that you're not chayiv? So the first shot is going to be Rabbi Elazar, then it's going to be Rabbi Yochanan. So now we're already a little educated because we just learned the sugya now before Ayichai for Charisha. Is Choresh is plowing on Shvi, is that right or not? So if you hold that Charisha is not Chayiv, so then that'll be pshat in what we just spoke about. You might think that's considered Tosefes. Tosefes means like it's an additional thing that the Torah doesn't say. The Torah says only Zoreya, Zomer, Kotzer, Botzer. And you might think that you're chayiv for an additional amlach also, which would be plowing. And why would you think so? Klal the product klal. Like I said before, that if you don't hold like a Rabban or Rabbi Ila, so you could learn now from the pasuk that Shabbat Shabbason Yal Ora, it says a klal, and then it says again a prat, then it says again a klal. Even though one is asay, one is a losa asay, if you hold it, you're still allowed to learn it out as a klal the product klal. So you should be chayiv for choresh. Then there's a drasha to say no. But not the Talmud Leptura. What's the drash to say that you're potter? Tim King, Kalani Prati Lamali. That's what it says at the bottom of the page. Not so bottom, the whole bottom of the Amud Aleph, that it says the reason why you potter is because the fact that it spoke out these four things is to say only these things. This is up. Okay, I can't highlight a few lines here. Okay, but this is where the Gemara says that it didn't have to say why did the Torah have to speak out these four things? To tell you that it could have just said two of them and you learn out everything. It wants to tell you only these things are chayiv, nothing else. So this Gemara, number base, is saying the same thing as number aleph, that choresh is not going to be chayiv. So Tais even talks about that. You bring it right that Rabbi Elazar is the one who says it over here. The Gemara before didn't seem to know who says what. But good, this is what the Gemara seems to say, according to Rabbi Elazar, that charisha is not chayiv the Raisa, Malkus, on Shemitah. And that's what Dimi might have meant. Yachal Yilka Al Tosefes. You might think you're chayiv for an additional malacha. No, you're not. What is that? Choresh. And the truth is not only choresh, any kind of malacha. Any malacha that doesn't say in the Torah, besides these four, you might think you're chayiv kamash malano. Whatever the Torah says and nothing else. That's very relevant to the subject we just learned. But there's another pshat now, and now we're going off into another subject. Now we're going to go to a new open up new horizons now. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, that the pshat in this formula that Avdimi came and said Yachal Yilka Al Tosefes is not talking about charisha, whole different subject. Yachal Ayamim Shosifu Chachamim Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. He's going on the days that the Chachamim added on before Rosh Hashanah. It means that's called Tosefes Shvius. Now the word Tosefes is really it fits better according to this. It's called Tosefes Shvius, and that's the subject called Tosefes Shvius that Shemitah started in Rosh Hashanah. The Shemitah does now. This year of Shemitah, when did it start? Rosh Hashanah. In the Mishnayos, if you learn Mishnayos, it comes out that there's something called Tosefes Shvius that the farmers wouldn't be allowed to do malacha even before. And nobody heard of it nowadays because this is going to be the sugya that says that it doesn't apply. But it's going to take time, today and tomorrow. You have to go into tomorrow to see the end of the sugya. But here it's going to say, you might think that is the Raisa. Here it says, you might think that is Malkus on Tosefes Shvius. Yachal Yilk al Tosefes Rosh Hashanah. To ask him B'chosh B'katz Tishbot is a drasha that might be B'chosh B'katz Tishbot that you're not allowed to do malacha even before Shemitah. And you might think it's the Raisa. And there's a drasha to say that you're not chayiv. It's not going to be the Raisa. We'll see as we go along. Here the Gemara itself says we'll see soon. We'll see soon what the drasha is going to be. So it's very vague. We don't even know what all this means. What's called Tosefes Shemitah? What does it mean? You're not allowed to do malacha before Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah starts. There's a year of Shemitah. It's the 7th year. So why shouldn't you allow to do malacha before that? So now the Gemara is going to open up the sugya for us and be very kind to bring down Mishnayos.
That's going to tell you when the Sefer starts.
Right. And when the Sefer starts, and then to say that it's not the Raisa.
Right.
And we're going to come at the end of the sugya. We have a little bit of we're ahead of the game a little bit because we know we don't do Sefer Shvius at all. The farmers didn't stop before Rosh Hashanah.
A year is enough.
So the question is, what happened to it? If there's Mishnayos, you learn Sefer Shvius, you learn that there's such thing called the Sefer Shvius, and nowadays no one knows about it. So that's going to be our sugya. So far, the Gemara doesn't say that it's off. The Gemara says that it's not the Raisa. So the Gemara doesn't usually do this. The Gemara gives us a lot of background over here, as if we don't know the Mishnayos. We're supposed to know the Mishnayos, but the Gemara here is kind enough to understand that we don't know the Mishnayos, and it's going to tell us what we're talking about.
And how about with Ilanos trees?
Oh, everything's going to be in the sugya. There must be everything.
Because we learned a little bit about Ilanos planting two.
That's only going to be a couple of cases that it shouldn't be, that it should be considered a year before during Orla, things like that. That might be a side consideration, not to make a year of Orla. The first year of the Orla should be counted during Shemitah. That no one should come for a chashad that may be planted during Shemitah. That's how we learned the sugya once upon a time. But that's like besides Tosefes Rosh Hashanah, besides Tosefes Shvius. That's going to be like a side chash that someone years later will think, oh, your Orla year is over. That means to count back 3 years. Oh, you planted it during Shemitah, during Orla, during Shemitah. That's a new point. But the Gemara, I think, that's not going to consider that issue over here.
Excuse me.
Yes, please.
So at this point, Rabbi Yochanan is coming to say there are things that are Tosefet Rosh Hashanah that you might think are included, but I'm going to show you that they're not included.
But you might think that it's the Raisa. You might think that it's the Raisa and it's Malchus. I'll tell you, it's not going to be Malchus.
Oh, okay.
That's how the words go, right? He says Yachal Yilkia, Kamash Blon. There's no Malchus. So he seems to be saying that it might be the Raisa, but it's not going to be Malchus. Or it might. I'm sorry. That it might. I said it wrong. That it might be Aser, but it's not the Raisa. But we're going to find out at the end of the sugya that we're not going to do it at all, even with Rabbanan. We're not going to do anything. But that'll take time. But here the Gemara starts introducing the whole concept called Tosefes. What is that for? My Yom Mishlefnei Rosh Hashanah. What does that mean? Kidatnan, a Mishnah in Shemitah, and it goes here on the side. You look Shvius Mishnah, Perek Aleph Mishnah. Right away, as soon as you start Masech Shvius, this is what you find. Ad Mosai Chorshin B'Sdei Ilam Ber Shvius. Till when are you allowed to plow a tree field, a field of trees, the year before Shvius? That means that right away the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to do it until Rosh Hashanah. You can't do it until Shemitah starts. Till when could you plow the field, the tree of fields? As long as it is still benefiting the fruit of this year, of the 6th year, then you're allowed to plow the tree. But once it isn't beneficial for the 6th year fruit, it's only going to be beneficial for the 7th year fruit, you're not allowed to. Even though it's still the 6th year, what's the problem? Let me do whatever I want until Shemitah. He says no, that once it isn't beneficial for the 6th year fruit, it's only going to be beneficial for the next year, you're not allowed to do it anymore. He said until Shavuos. So Shavuos means in Sivan. So Tammuz, Elul, Tishrei, almost 4 months before you have to start. You have to stop working.
Oh, so it's more machmir.
So who's machmir? They're pretty close. The Beis Shammai also holds that it's around that time. That it doesn't tell you what time. It just says as long as it's good for the fruit. When is that? So the Mishnah says that it's pretty close. The question is which one is further, which one is. So you're saying that according to the cloud, the Beis Hillel's Mekel, it must be the Beis Shammai was earlier. Taisa says like you, I think. So it must be that Shavuos is later. They bring down another pshat that it could be that according to Beis Shammai, it's not any given. It could be some, depends on the year. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later. Okay. Fa'ad masai chorshin v'stei lavan erev shvi is the one I allowed to plow a wheat field. A stei lavan means a white field. They say that it means a wheat field, maybe because it looks white, in contrast to a tree field. So till when I allowed to plow a wheat field, also, you would have think, what's the problem? I could do it until Rosh Hashanah because that's when Shemitah starts. There's no, here, not allowed to do it. until the moisture of the field is over. As long as the field is still moist, then you'd be allowed to be chorish. Once it's not moist anymore, then you're not allowed to. As long as people would still plow the field in order to plant cucumbers. Mikshos and midlos. Mikshos, they say, is like cucumbers, more or less, squash and pumpkin. So that means that the field is still usable for the 6th year. But once it's not usable for the 6th year anymore, and your plowing is only going to be for the purpose of the 7th year, that it should be a better field, then you're not allowed to. Rabbi Shimon Omer came this
If there's leichas,
then you are, I think that you're allowed to then because it's still beneficial for that year, for the 6th year. I think, does Rashi say anything on that? That the rain stops. As long as it's still moist from the rain of this year, so then the plowing helps for this year, for the 6th year. Because once the moisture, it's not a moist field anymore, you're not allowed to plow because it looks like you're plowing for the 7th year. Now, what's the problem? So plow for the 7th year. It's still the 6th year. And it says, no, you're not allowed to. If it's beneficial only for the 7th year, then you're not allowed to do it even in the 6th year.
And what's this one thing for the
Makshos and others, I think the point is that these kind of things, like these cucumbers, that they could grow speedily, soon, that you might even use the field that's merely a wheat field, but now since the wheat season is over, let me plant cucumbers that can make a fast harvest of that also.
And even though there's no leichas to b'shvil hachitim.
As long as there's no, he says it's the same time. That's only when it's moist. Once it's not moist, then you won't use it anymore for cucumbers and stuff.
Even without, you wouldn't plant the.
You wouldn't plant cucumbers and makshos, and because that doesn't work. You have to have moisture for it. That's what it seems. I'm not sure about all the agricultural points, but that's the general idea. But Shimon Omer, we're still in the middle of the subject of till when are you allowed to plow the wheat field. It's not, he doesn't want that everybody should have the decision that I'm still planting and I'm not planting when his pumpkins he does plant later, he doesn't. He wants to have like a standardized time. That Pesach, he wants to make a standard time. So he says Pesach, a wheat field until Pesach and a tree field until Shavuos. What do we have so far? That there's a Mishnah in the beginning of Shvius that says that there's a time during the Sefer Shvius that you're not allowed to work the field even before Rosh Hashanah, by a tree field until Shavuos, by a wheat field even earlier, until Pesach only, 6 months before, approximately. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, Rabbi Pazi said in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, the name of Bar Kapara, that Rabbi Gamliel at his Bezdin, they voted and they nullified these 2 times. That even though it says in the Mishnah they did not allow to plant from Shavuos and Pesach, whatever, about a wheat field and a tree field, they nullified it. You're allowed to. They took away this halacha. How could they change that halacha? It says the Mishnah earlier was B'Sham B'Yisrael, big but they didn't. How could a later Bezin come and nullify the takana of B'Sham and B'Yisrael? So far, you didn't say that as the Raisa. In the beginning of the whole sugya, we started that you might think something's the Raisa with the Malkus. That sounds like the question of the Raisa. But so far, you learn the Mishnah, it doesn't say that as the Raisa. It says B'Shamai, B'Yisrael, and then Rabbi Gamliel nullified it. So we're not getting into any of the Raisa yet. But it does say that B'Shamai still said that it's Azar, and Rabbi Gamliel, he said that it's Mutter, he took it away. How can he nullify the takana of earlier Bezdin? But that a Bezdin cannot nullify a different Bezdin's psak only if they're bigger in wisdom and in number, and they're not as big as B'Shamai B'Yisrael. So for a moment, he didn't know what to answer, and then he said, then he got the answer. He must say that even though the B'Shamai B'Yisrael themselves, that even though when the Bezdin makes a takana, a later Bezdin that's not as big as them cannot nullify it, but if the original Bezdin, they put a clause in, whoever wants to, we give permission. That we give permission that any Bezdin that can come even smaller than us, they could nullify our takana. So it must be that if you find that Gamliel nullified the takana B'Shamai B'Yisrael, it must be that the clause was there. B'Shamai B'Yisrael permitted anybody that comes, they could nullify it. But the Gemara is now the Gemara comes into what we were looking for, that it isn't so simple that it's only Bisham Beis Hillel. There's a deraisa going on over here. Did hui? Is it only Bisham? Is their own? It's only Rabbanan. It's Allah Moshe Messina. Now the kasha is only going to be how did Ram Gamliel nullify a deraisa? But the Gemara is coming in now to say that there's Allah Moshe Messina, that's deraisa, that you're not allowed to work the field even in the 6th year. Tosefes Shvius is deraisa, and that's going to be what the Gemara was talking about in the beginning of the page. That's the name of a place. From the place of Bikas Beis Chorsan, he said, Esen Etios, Arava, V'nisach Hamayim, Malach Moshe Messinai. We had this already. It says on the side here, this is already the 4th time we had it. We had it Sukkah 34, Sukkah 44, Tainus Gimel, and here we are for the 4th time. Only one more time in Shas we'll have left again in Zvachim, a long time. But anyway, he said that these things are Allah Moshe Messinai. 3 things, nothing to do with each other. Esen Etios, we'll see if it has nothing to do with each other, but it says Esen Etios, Arava, Nisach Hamayim. So the easy ones is Arava, Nisach Hamayim. Nisach Hamayim is the easiest one. Nisach Hamayim means that they made libations of water in the Beis HaMikdash and Sukkos. We had a drasha about that also. Mem Yud Mem. Here it says it's Allah Moshe Messinai, and that is not a parish pasuk in the Torah, but it's oral law. Allah Moshe Messinai. Arava is not what we call Arava. The Arava we have with the lulav and Arava and Hadassim, and that's for sure in the pasuk. It says Arvei Nachal. But there's a mitzvah of Arava in the Beis HaMikdash that they put around the mizbeach, big Aravos. So that is Allah Moshe Messinai. And the first thing is Esen Etios. Esen Etios means 10 saplings. That if you have a field that's a certain size that has 10 saplings that are evenly distributed amongst the field, so then the field needs to be taken care of because of these 10 trees, and therefore you're allowed to work the whole field just for these 10 until Shemitah. Rashi over here on Esen Etios, Hamfuzas Sof Beisa, Chorshin Kol Asada B'Shvilan Be'er Shvius Ad Rosh Hashanah. That if you have 10 trees scattered, distributed in the field, which is 50 by 50 amos, you allow the whole field for them until Rosh Hashanah, because the field needs them. It's going to be a loss if not. But it says it's Allah Moshe Messinai. So what does the Gemara want from that? That if you have Allah Moshe Messinai talking about that when you're allowed to plow until Shemitah, because it's considered a hefsid, that means that otherwise you would not be allowed to plow. That means that as the rise. It means if you need Allah Moshe Messinai to tell you a heter, it has to be that the Torah also recognizes as an isser. So what are you telling me? That the whole thing is a Bisham Beis Hillel, and they put a clause in Rav Gamliel could nullify it. It says here that it's Allah Moshe Messinai, it's the Raisa, so nobody could nullify it. Rabbi Yitzchak Kigimir Yilchas HaShloshim Yom Lefnei Rosh Hashanah. Vasufani Token Pesach Mu'at Seres. Vasu Bidu Kol Rotz Levanta Yabo V'Yivata. That here's Allah Moshe Messinai. That's 30 days. Means from Rosh Chodesh Elul, but the Raisa you're not allowed to work the fields before Shemitah, and on that you have the Esen Etios, you're allowed to go until Rosh Hashanah. And then Bisham Yisrael made the takana of Pesach and it's shvuas for a tree, for a fruit tree, for a tree field, for a wheat field. And on that, Rabbi Gamliel, and they said on that takana of theirs that we're putting in a clause whoever wants to nullify it can nullify it. And that's what Rabbi Gamliel nullified. And the deraisa is still relevant. They did not allow to do 30 days before. We'll stop here. The Gemara is still in the middle. And as far as we got so far, it does say that there's a Tosefes Shvius of 30 days. And we still don't know. And here it says on top of the page, we're looking for this thing that you might think that there's going to be Tosefes Rosh Hashanah and the Ma'az Malkus, and it's going to say that there's no Malkus. So we're still holding our breath until tomorrow to see how is it not going to be the Raisa. So far we say that there is a 30 days, which is the Raisa. So we'll continue tomorrow. All this came in Aga because we really brought in the thing about Shvius, just to get how the whole thing developed over here. The Mishnah says that there's a lot of water on Shemitah, for Beis HaShlachin, which is going to be absent. If you don't water it, it's going to be a loss, and therefore you're allowed to water. The Gemara said a big problem. How can you be transgress of the Raisa because of Hefsid? It's the Raisa. If it's Rabbanan, is okay, but it's the Raisa. And the Gemara said two tirutzim. Abaye was that only Shemitah B'zman Hazeh, point to Rebbe, is Rabbanan. Rebbe said no, that only the Avos is Aser, but the Toldos is Mutter with the Raisa. So watering is only a Tolda, and therefore it's going to be Mutter with the Raisa, only also with Rabbanan, and therefore they promoted it for Peseda. But then the Gemara opened up the sugi bigger and said that not only the watering, even choresh, even the plowing itself also might only be Rabbanan, and that's Machlokes Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yochanan, that maybe the fact that the Torah enumerated only where it says Soreya, Zomer, Kotzer, Botzer, only those things are Asam with the rice, everything else is Mutter with the rice, only Asam with Rabbanan, and therefore even Charish is going to be the Rabbanan. Once we got into that, so the Gemara brought also of Dimi's memory that maybe that's the Pshat in his memory, that he says this mysterious statement, Yechad Yilka Al Tosefes, V'nasal Talmud Ptura, might be Charisha, that you might think Charish is the Raisa. No, it's not, because the fact that the Torah enumerated these 4 things means nothing else is the Raisa. And it could be, I didn't see the Lach yet, who we pass like, but put us leave it that there's such a machlokes if maybe only the 4 things is the Raisa, everything else might be the Rabbanan. After that, the Gemara now opened up a new subject based on this formula of Rav Dimi that maybe has something else. Maybe it has to do with the Tosefes Shvius, which means there's a time that you're not allowed to work the field in the 6th year, even though it's still the 6th year. What's the problem? Because it helps the 7th year's growth, and maybe it's also the Raisa, and then it says no, it's not the Raisa. There's going to be a drasha to say it's not. We don't know what it is yet. First, the Gemara introduced us to the whole question about Pesach and Shavuos, that you're not allowed to work the wheat field from Pesach and the tree field from Shavuos. And Rav Gamliel nullified that. And how could they nullify Beisham Beisel? Because they put in the clause originally that anybody could nullify this halacha. But the Gemara says there's halacha Moshe Messina about it. Esem says the halacha Moshe Messina. So what are you saying that it's only Beisham Beisel? The Gemara says 30 days is the Raisa. 30 days, which Chodesh Elul is the Raisa, and that you couldn't nullify.
But that's halach Moshe.
Right, that's halacha Moshe Messina, and that you can't nullify. We still have to find out how did they nullify it. The Maisa got nullified nowadays, so we didn't get there yet. That's going to be tomorrow. And what Beisham still did add on from Pesach and Shavuos, that Rav Gamliel nullified because they gave him permission to nullify it. But we're still holding that this the rice also is going to come off somehow, and we don't know yet how. Okay, Yashikar, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Baruch Hashem, very good, very good. Baruch Hashem. Hope everybody's feeling well, and it should be a good week for everybody. Yashikar. Shavua Tov. Thank you. Shavua Tov. Yashikar.